Our meeting to order at 6:31. The first item on our agenda is the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Next item is approval of minutes. You should have 3 separate minutes in your packet. So our regular meeting on the 16th, a special meeting on the 16th, and a special meeting on the 23rd.
I never got the minutes for the 23rd.
Okay, they're in your packet.
Oh, they are.
You should be, they're all in
He
there.
might not have gotten them because I never used to print them before, but I printed them.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Yeah, I always get them off email.
Would you like to look at, those are mine. So let's start with, I'll make a motion to approve the minutes from our special meeting on the 16th.
Second.
All right, any discussion on the January 16th special meeting minutes? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. I'll move to approve our regular meeting minutes from the 16th.
Oh, second.
John, any discussion on the regular meeting from the 16th? All those in favor?
Aye.
So that leaves us with the 20 meeting, special budget workshop meeting minutes from the 23rd. I'll move to approve those.
I'll second.
Give John a minute to take a look at them.
It's okay.
Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Abstain,
Opposed?
not
One
there.
abstention. Okay,
Want these back?
I'll take that. You can keep them, it's been easier. You can keep. All right, anyone present to speak? Yes, we just ask you identify yourself for the record.
May I remain seated? or-
Absolutely,
Okay.
whichever you would prefer.
Tom Bacino, and we own property, the Mill Works on Route 32 in WIllington. I'm here this evening with some colleagues as well, following up from our conversation regarding the most recent Connecticut State Department of Transportation traffic investigative report that was done. I believe it was completed in December. And there have been a number of conversations with the Selectman's office over the last 5 or 6 years regarding the flow of traffic, the speed of traffic, and the failure to yield to pedestrians and crosswalks in that area. And most recently, last summer, met with Christina and had a conversation, and also one of our community members, the St. Paul Church, had written correspondence to Christina regarding this same issue. Christina, I think, then had requested the DOT look into the matter. A request was made to actually reduce the speed limit from the top of the hill where Fisher Hill Road intersects with Route 32 to the southern end of the school zone, which currently is 25 miles per hour. The recommended speed limit on that curve is posted at a recommended speed limit of 25, and then it changes to 35, and then back to 25 in the school zone. So we thought it would make sense to maintain a constant speed of 25 through that zone that I just mentioned. And I believe at either end of that zone, it's 35 miles an hour. North changes to 45 a ways back, and I believe it also does as you move south away from the school. So that, along with a recommendation for signage or interventions that highlight the crosswalks, there are 4 crosswalks in that zone, one across from the mill, one across from the Federated Church, and 2 by the school. And I know that the one that is across from the mill, or that particular crosswalk, the southernmost sign indicating a crosswalk is actually not even close to the crosswalk. So that is an issue. But in addition to that, when I did meet with Christina, she suggested that I offer some ideas or solutions, which I did. And I brought another copy of that with me tonight. Just went around the area looking at some of the signage, some of the interventions that are used, particularly in Stafford. As you enter Stafford, there's a solar-powered speed limit kind of sign that suggests the speed at which traffic is flowing. In the past, there's been effort to have state police be in the area. We don't have our own police force, so that's not something that can be there permanently. And it's a deterrent, but unfortunately, when officers' cars aren't there, the traffic speed does pick up. At events, both at the mill and the church down the road, we often put cones out in the road to also be a deterrent for traffic, but we're still finding that traffic does not yield for pedestrians in the crosswalk. So as a result of all of this, and I'm sorry to go on and on about the history, the DOT did conduct this study, and we were very surprised at the recommendations that came back. The 2 recommendations were that they denied reducing the speed limit in this zone from Fisher Hill Road to the southern end of the school zone. And then, in addition to that, they recommended increasing the speed limit from 35 miles an hour to 45 miles an hour on either side of that zone. And at least that's the interpretation of the report that we got. Because this has been a long-standing issue, and because there are a number of people that are also surprised and dissatisfied and believe the recommendations from the state DOT are unacceptable, they had signed a petition in opposition to these recommendations, which I brought tonight, and would like to leave with you, if I could. And there may be others that are interested in speaking as well.
Anyone else present to speak? Yes.
My name is Keith Anderson, representing St. Paul's Church, and basically just want to say the same things that Tom just said. So I'm here just kind of representing the church, and we just find that there's been a lot of issues with people trying to go to the crosswalk and even stepping into the crosswalk with just traffic going right by people, and it's just become kind of a safety issue for us at the church. And I've talked to the pastor down the road. He has the same issue with his church, and as I drive down the road, I see the same thing happening at the school as well. When students and parents are trying to cross, no one stops for them either. So just to raise that same concern, especially at the crosswalks for us, and see if there was something that could be done. And I know in the letter that you sent me recently, you said there was going to be a radar speed that would show people their speed.
Potentially.
Potentially, if
Potentially.
down the road that would be a possibility. And like Tom said, there's been times where the state police have parked in our parking lot, and that has definitely helped. But that only lasted a few weeks because they just don't have the manpower to have people there all the time. So.
Anyone else?
I'll just back up what Tom said and.
Just identify yourself for the record.
Yeah, the Federated Church has had many
I just
close
need you to
calls.
identify yourself.
Alice Castles. The Federated Church has had many people almost hit in that in the crosswalk, where they just challenge her. And it's very dangerous there.
Didn't the Federated Church used to have somebody out there with a slow sign and a stop sign?
No,
At one
no,
point,
we
you never
have
had-
cones out, we have cones both,
Yeah.
to the hill, you know, that little hill before you get to the church, we keep cones from there to Center Street. And in fact, I don't know if you remember Mrs. Latter, Margaret Latter? No, she lived in the two-family across the street from the mill. Got killed at Center Street, at Village Street by the convalescent home, just walking in the evening from coming down the sidewalk
Yeah.
and getting back up on the sidewalk in the evening when it was plenty of light out there, and that was probably more of a speed issue. And I'm a bus driver in my retirement through there, and it's not easy going through there.
Well, I wonder if, yeah, I thought I remembered that. Maybe I'm getting old, my memory's not that good, but I kind of thought I recalled seeing somebody, maybe it was for a
During
special.
Vacation Bible.
Yeah.
Sometimes
Oh,
there would
we
be,
do,
during
when we have
VBS, there's someone
Vacation
there.
Bible in the summer with so
Maybe
many
that's
kids,
what
sometimes we have 100 kids.
And,
So
you know,
yes, we do have somebody out there.
And that
absolutely.
might be,
It's on the agenda, so we can talk about it
okay,
later.
sorry.
That's okay.
Yeah.
I don't see, they should do its best. And increasing that limit closer to Fisher Hill makes no sense. And that corner by the Fishing Game Club and the old dairy barn is not a corner you want to do 45 around with wet roads and so forth. So it's always been an area where you need to slow down.
Anyone else present to speak?
May I say one more thing?
Sure.
Tom Bacino. Recently, the Millworks was listed on the Connecticut State Register of Historic Places in 2014, and most recently the designation came about from the VCI grant, identifying that zone as part of a listing on the National Historic Register. And through the consultant report that came out of that study a couple of years ago, one of the recommendations was traffic calming and landscaping and pedestrian issues in that area, that designated boundary, which is essentially from Fisher Hill Road to the school. You know, there just seems to be enough justification from a health and safety standpoint, recommendations from the grant and the consultant work, and certainly a level of opposition to these most recent recommendations that we're requesting another look, possibly from the town in support of that. So.
And I'm Cindy Mokel, M-O-E-C-K-E-L, associated with DC Chap. And I just want to say that when we have events there and people are parking across the street, my husband is usually one of the people out there with the flashlight to show them where the door is. And, you know, especially at night, this is an issue, but any time of the day, and people go roaring by there, and they get rolling down the hill and just keep going. So it's something to kind of calm that down and maybe make it obvious that people are trying to use more than 2 lanes of this road.
Anyone else present to speak? All right, that particular item is on the agenda, so we will discuss it further later. We'll take those.
There's another letter here from a board member. I don't know if you wanted it read or you just want it for your record. That's a letter,
Okay.
petition, and the email.
Okay, thank you.
You can read it into the minutes.
At that time. All right, so you'll see a list of correspondence in front of you. is all on top of it. And now available upstairs. Do you have any questions? You have that right, Tom? Status report, we now have LoSiP, did we discuss at the last meeting, LoSiP money is available, so we're moving forward with some projects from those funds, now that they have been made available from the state. So some things that were stagnant before now are gonna start moving forward as we get, especially towards spring. Ground thaws, we can actually put some shovels in. So keep you updated on those as we get closer. Public Works. So Derek has let us know that the crew has been busy with the following: making sand and salt mix, vehicle and equipment repairs, cleaning the vehicles, pushing up salt deliveries. I think he said he just got one today. Backblading gravel roads with the backhoe, digging out the swale on Sharps Mill to keep water off the road to prevent icing, plowing and sanding of roads, municipal lots and sidewalks, roadside brush and tree removal, and they did some work in the assessor's office, framing in the door between the assessor's office and the town clerk to help with sound. So the walls here are thin, literally. Alrighty, so new business, the first item was this study, and you should each have a copy of it. So I will tell you that within my first week here, I did receive a call based on a letter that had been written to Christina, and then she followed up with the State Traffic Administration. So they had done a study over the course of the summer into the fall and had made their report. I definitely at that time did not have much background on it. There was a request to lower the speed limit. After their study, they denied that request. And the change, they did recommend moving some signs within the area around the mills. Moving them a little bit closer. Any other signs may come at a cost to us. The hard part about this particular spot is it is a state road. So although the local traffic authority, that really pertains, the authority part is on our local roads. So outside of that, we rely, it's at their purview. So we certainly can speak on behalf of the town. I can lobby on behalf of Willington and our residents based on what this board would like to do. The change that they're making is north of Fisher Hill, so not coming down the hill, but going back up. And if you read in the second page of the report, they discuss, this is based on the above. So the transition from 35 to 45 miles north of Fisher Hill, it's been signed, the point is at 0.76 miles north of Fisher Hill. Don't ask me exactly where that is because I couldn't tell you to the pinpoint. But it's going away from the Mills area in the general direction of
So
Stafford.
would it stay the same coming?
It would stay the same coming down the hill.
Yeah.
What they're talking about is moving the sign. They approved transition from 35 to 45 is at a certain point, but the existing speed limit signs that mark that transition are in a different place and have been that way for the last 30 years. The unfortunate thing here is, this is what they're saying, we've drawn attention to that as opposed to letting sleeping dogs lie, if you will. So they're saying where the transition should be and the sign should be is not accurately marked. So while they're not raising the speed limit, they're adjusting the signs for the speeds that are there. That is what the review brought. So that the transition from 35 to 45 should be at one point. It's marked further and has been that way, and they acknowledge that. It's been signed in that way. So it's recommended that the approved speed limits that are already there and approved, that the signs be modified. Now, if we would like, I could contact them again and ask once again for them to consider changing based on the concerns of our residents and business owners in that area. Thoughts?
It's a walking area, it's a walking area, as opposed to any other places with sidewalks and so forth.
So they are not changing the speed limit
Right.
from Fisher Hill to
Right.
the school, through the school zone and Batty Road. That is remaining the way that it is. It will not, what they're saying is it won't go down, as we had been requested. There are things we can do to deter. It sounds like you've already had police officers out there. I think we all know that that lasts as long as there's an officer sitting there. And that we don't have a police force, that we don't have someone to be out there. There are those your speed limit signs. They do come at a cost.
Right, and not necessarily effective for changing
Correct.
driver behavior. I think there's some studies on
There are.
that they may not do much to calm traffic, despite
You
the
know,
intent.
if
That
the
is
state
correct.
police would make their presence known in that area, I had a young lady get a speeding ticket. She got 2 of them in 10 days, and it was the last time she went speeding through that area. So they could once in a while go through there and make themselves known.
They
They
could.
used to
That's-
do that. They really did.
That's certainly.
You don't have
we
to
could
hang
a-
out.
We could ask for that, but it's not.
No, but it's,
Your thoughts on putting a speed limit sign up, whether it's temporary, if we were to purchase one?
I think we need to look at other traffic calming measures in the meantime. I think there are a lot of physical, obviously, everything comes at a cost, but there are a lot of physical modifications that we can make to the area that would perhaps be more beneficial than spending money on
what would that be?
signage that can be ignored, or a, what are they called? The speed limit signs?
Oh, yeah, those are the.
Yeah, the radar, like, I
Like there's
don't.
a solar, I believe it's
Yeah.
a solar one in Stafford.
Right.
That's there, some,
So,
Yeah,
I mean-
sometimes I even almost get down to what the speed limit is while I'm looking at that solar sign in Stafford.
sometimes,
Uh,
yeah. Your goal is to get right to what it's supposed to be.
Again, like you say, if you can get the police out there, that's
They make their
effective.
presence known every once in a while.
So,
It does work.
and then the other thing with the your speed limit sign, I think, in the beginning, it would be a deterrent,
Mhm.
but not a long-term solution, because with no enforcement, and we
Right.
don't have the means to enforce that, there would be nobody policing that. And then I think,
Well,
there would be a point where people would begin to realize that it is a sign that is there.
whether we
Yes,
have-
Tom?
I was just gonna say, the combination of those solar-powered your speed signs with intermittent intervention by the police could really be meaningful, I think. As you mentioned, it may not be effective alone, but if there is a random, presence by police in addition to that, that could be effective.
When you had them out there in the past, was that at your request? Or-
Yes, it was at our request as well as the church's request.
The
Was there any
Federated
charge to
Church
your
has already,
businesses for
has
that?
also
I'm
They
sorry.
requested.
didn't charge you in any way?
No,
No,
they were,
no,
they
no.
were happy to be there, but the thing was, it was 2 or 3 weeks and then they
Right.
stopped coming, which we expected, but.
Right.
And then the other thing that I think is to address is the crosswalks. I don't know if there's anything we could put signage in the crosswalk, but that's one of the main things too, when people are walking through them.
We can look at what those would be. Again, I'm not sure what kind of extra signs that we can put up and where within the area. We would work with the state on that, again, because it is a state road.
Mhm.
There would
Again,
be
too,
some issues to work out.
What do we do at Hall School when they have graduation and you use both parking lots, 32 and behind?
What do we do?
Do we have somebody there with
No.
a lot of extra traffic?
Not typically, no.
I don't recall if we do, but again,
Always parked in the back, so I don't know. I don't think so. I've
having-
never seen anyone.
having someone out there with a slow and stop sign, during the high traffic areas, to me sounds probably very effective. People will pay attention. It says here in this report here that the primary goal for speed limits, one will be realistic, comfortable, and respected by drivers. And people tend to drive at the speed that they perceive is the reasonable speed for where they're going, and if the stop sign or if the speed limit agrees with them, then it's fine. And if it doesn't, it's not. So they come down there and they very often have no idea that people are trying to cross the street. There's only certain times when people are trying to cross the street. If you have somebody down there, I'm thinking especially in front of the Federated Church, because it's a nice, strong, straight area there with a sign, people are going to notice that. They're going to slow down. They're going to stop. I don't know exactly where when they're crossing to the mill, where do they go? From that top of the hill there and across the street, or?
No, it's actually at the base of the hill, directly across from the mill. And, you know, going north and coming south, there are currently flashers there with a recommended speed limit of 25.
Yeah.
For the hill.
Yeah, that's a
Yeah.
school,
That's
that's
for
a
the,
state
that's,
law.
no, that's for the ones for the hill. Then there's separate signs farther down for the school, and they're only on at a certain time.
Right.
Okay. I want to read into the record, Robin, a letter from Chris Gunderson. Good evening. I am a longtime resident of the Millworks community and wanted to voice my opinion on the speed limit discussion despite my absence. I frequently travel south on Route 32, down the hill, and turn into the north lot of the Millworks facility by Hall's Pond. Despite slowing down in the corner to safely turn, travelers behind my vehicle often don't make the same effort. Most often it results in a tailgating situation, although when I have to stop the vehicle to wait for oncoming traffic before the turn, it has nearly caused an accident on a few occasions. There currently may not be ample time to slow down if a vehicle comes around this corner too fast, and increasing the speed limit will certainly make the situation worse. Also worth noting, when directing traffic for some of our programming, I often observe drivers violating the crosswalk rule and not stopping for pedestrians, despite people clearly there waiting to cross. Over the last 6 years, I have maintained a studio at the Millworks. Foot traffic has increased, and there is no excuse for not yielding to pedestrians. Failing to obey the speed limit and crosswalk setting is unacceptable, and it puts residents and visitors to the Millworks at risk. The issue of road safety around the Millworks is critical for its development, as our vision of becoming a successful arts and cultural center begins and ends with a safe and welcoming environment. I am interested in hearing about tonight's discussion and possible solutions for this important issue. Thank you, Chris Gunderson, resident artist.
So there are quite a few things that we can do in addition to signage, in addition to requesting that we have Troop C come spend some time down there. I think we should do those things. So there are several, and I can't list them all off the top of my head at the moment, but there are several things such as, ways that the road can be painted, for example, which we would have to also be in contact with the state because we can't do that. But, we can request that they paint like the large triangles in the road right by the pedestrian walkway the pedestrian crossway on the hill, so that there's some visual interruption to the road surface, and drivers are more likely to pay attention to what they're doing and where they're going. There are strategies similar to having a person out there at the crosswalk where we can have our own, which we don't need any state approval to do, we can have our own flags that are outside of the easement area of this, because there's a certain buffer zone that we can't encroach upon. So with flags for pedestrians who are crossing, bright orange flags, and so I can send some of that information over for review, and we can see if there are any strategies in there that we might be able to employ, things that we can control, as well as things that we can ask the state to help us with.
Okay.
We'll start to look at some options we have. At the same time, I'll reach out to them and see if they would be willing to reconsider the request. Again,
Fair.
sometimes the opposite of what we hope to have done is what's done, and when we ask them to look into things, they find exactly what we weren't looking for. And that's the tough part about this road being a major road running through our community, but for the most part outside of our authority. So, and we all use it. And beyond those areas, there are many resident housing on that area. So, are your services on Sundays primarily?
Yep.
Do you put someone into the crosswalk, or?
We have like a greeter out there. We haven't
Okay.
took like an action of having someone put a stop sign,
Right.
but they're more just, hi, how you doing? And
Okay.
showing people where the front door
And I know the church uses the cones, but they are farther away from the hill. You're certainly much closer to the hill, so I almost worry about suggesting that because it puts somebody
Right.
that much closer to someone
Right.
coming down the
It would just be a
hill.
volunteer.
Absolutely. And if they're on the sidewalk, the parking area side of the road, it's a little bit harder to see them, so.
Right.
We will look for some other issues and then come back to this board, potentially at our next meeting and see if we've made any progress. Anything else on this topic? Gentlemen? Okay. So we will move forward, and these all I can keep correct. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all
Very
for
appreciated.
coming out. All right, the next item is a simple discussion of a potential CIP change. So I bring this to you because in the discussions of CIP, the CIP committee this year, there was an item that was approved, and it's on the CIP plan for the 17-18 fiscal year, approved by the Board of Finance, the Board of Selectmen, and then it went to town meeting. Okay, and that item was for the Board of Ed, and it was for exterior trim, doors, and the pillars in the front of the school of a total of $18,740. There is a possibility that there are some concerns at the school that they need to do another project in lieu of that would be more pressing. So they would want to push this project out, and Dr. Jacoby believes that that would be okay, that the issues they have are heating concern, and so that's more pressing. The only reason I bring it up here, and I believe we would probably need to talk to the Board of Finance, is because all of these projects in CIP, they fall under the Board of Selectmen budget, but they were approved by different facets of the town based on the plan as it was written. So this would be changing the plan, not necessarily the dollar amount. But I didn't think we should just go forth and say we're gonna use the money for project A, and then when it gets to spending time, we're gonna move to project C. But this is something that came up within the last couple weeks at Hall School. So I'm not opposed to saying, yes, the funds should be used for what they need to be, but I'm not comfortable saying that
Again,
alone.
this was approved by CIP originally,
Correct,
so, yeah.
yes. And so the
We-
CIP
should not be
comes,
us.
but the CIP comes back to here, it's not.
Yeah.
So the CIP committee just brings forth the plan that the Board of Selectmen approves.
Right,
So, once the plan has been approved, it's that committee's work is done, and it's not really in their hands. It was approved here, it's approved at the Board of Finance, and then at town meeting. So there were many other checks past the committee recommending a plan. The committee recommends a plan to this board, and we approve it. So that's why first stop here. My next step would be to have the same discussion at Board of Finance to see if they were opposed. I think these are unusual circumstances. I don't know that it's happened often, enough so that those on CIP didn't give me too much guidance as to precedent and things that would happen before. But the school is saying, we still have a need for this project to be done, but we have a greater need now than to wait till the next fiscal year to get some things done, if we could use those monies for the project that is more pressing.
And because this budget is voted on, do we have the ability to make that?
I believe yes, so my interpretation would be yes, because especially as far as, well, I shouldn't say that, the Board of Finance approves a budget for the Board of Ed, and then they can spend it at their own. They don't have line item veto, or so to speak. but this isn't in their budget, it's in the Board of Selectmen's budget under capital projects. So it's within our budget that the funds would come from. So if the new item were approved in CIP for the upcoming year, in year one, the 18-19 fiscal year, then she would, it would be done then. But, and again, this is potential, Dr. Jacoby is looking at all the things, and I'm gonna talk to her board, but I didn't want it to be a surprise out of nowhere to us, that she's asking that this project be pushed into place of where that new project would go, and that this would be done now.
Naturally, knights who say nay here. I get nervous because
I do too.
this has all been, I mean, this was
Yes,
not just something off the spur of the moment. This thing's gone through the whole process,
you're right.
decided it was needed.
And it's still needed.
And it's still needed. Now we've decided that something which never got noticed or whatever is needed even more.
I think we all are aware that in our almost 100-year-old building, these things can happen
Right.
without any warning. And it's in my opinion, that having heat for our staff and students at Hall School is of the utmost importance. And Dr. Jacoby presented it in a CIP request for next year, but knowing that it needs to be done now, but started with that particular process. So rather than have it be pushed off to after July 1, if it were approved in the next CIP plan, it would be done now. But, CIP is one of those strange particular items. I mean, I think we all, within our different budgets and in the different departments in the building, we budget for A, and sometimes B happens, and we have to change what we were gonna do. Maybe, we were planning to hire somebody, we didn't, and now we need new computer systems, or computers, because all our computers crashed. We make those changes within our budget. I think this is along the same lines.
Well, usually when if we come up with a emergency in the middle of the year, we usually have money, or we usually find
Right.
money to do it.
And what Dr. Jacoby was saying the first time was, instead of giving me some extra, I'll put this project off a little bit so that we could do the more pressing, instead of going to ask for more funds this year that may or may not be available, especially when times are tight. So,
I guess, so I would want to ask that question, because if we know whether or not there are funds available, if we have an emergency fund for situations like this, and ask, is that something that exists, and if it does, do we have the funds available? Because my concern is something that is voted on by multiple streams. Can we legitimately say we're changing the plan, even if it's completely justified?
right.
Like, I believe it's completely justified. I got the email saying that the band room was flooded because there was this
Right.
burst pipe. Like, it needs to happen. There's no question about that. But that's what an emergency fund is for. So if that exists and we have it, we use it for the purpose that it's intended, rather than potentially doing something fuzzy with something that's been voted upon by.
And I hear all those things. I think in different times, I might say that was a better road to go, but knowing how tight things are right now and the cuts that we got from the state, we'd be asking to spend more money. And then saying to Dr. Jacoby, here's the money for a project that you really think could be put off, but spend it anyway.
Yeah.
And we'll take money from over here instead of kind of flipping the projects. But I have the same concern about changing this particular plan, which is why we're here talking about it, because it's not as cut and dry as some other items.
Because if that project was something that could be put off, and yet it was important enough to
It is important enough.
to dedicate the money, even though times are tight, doesn't,
Yeah.
all of a sudden.
Now, this is merely for start of discussion, because once Dr. Jacoby speaks with her board and gets some more concrete things, she would come before us. and/or Board of Finance, and it may be a Board of Finance, not us, to make that change. But I thought we should be aware of it and start to think about what we would do. My first instinct was to say, this is more important, but then I had the same concern. This was important and needs to be done this year. And she said, it still needs to be done. It's still a concern. But if we're rating the two things, one could wait until the next fiscal year to be done, as opposed to with funds that are available today in February.
Understood.
So I will continue to share any information I get from Dr. Jacoby on this matter.
If we had not approved the original plan and had already put it off till next year,
She
what
would be looking at different issues, but we didn't, it's there. And so to me, it's not looking to spend an extra $18,000, just putting off moving something else a little bit farther that should be done now, but
Well, it
could,
would be,
it's not as pertinent as.
right, it still is an added expense that we weren't planning on.
Yes.
It's just whether we
But
add
you-
the expense to this year or we
What
add
had,
expense to
the way
next
it
year.
came up is it came up to CIP to be in the 18-19
Uh-huh.
CIP plan, so it will be on next year's plan. Because she can't add to this year's plan.
Right.
So, but if given the choice, would rather do that now and do this in the 18-19
Yes.
plan. And that's because things were frozen, so she couldn't get things done faster, or this would have been done already, but it's already been pushed out because of lack of funding.
Because CIP is supposed to give you a vehicle for planning what you're gonna do in the future.
Yes.
You know, we're gonna spend this much money on this project. I don't wanna commit to them all right now, so we'll do this one next year and this one the year after. And that way we've got the money put on. So we did that in this particular case. CIP is not really supposed to be an emergency fund, although this
No.
is what we're using it as here.
Well, and again, this is not a request, it's merely the discussion for if it, at that CIP meeting, the group as a whole thought, well, if you could do this now and move this one, then maybe that could be okay. But I had a concern that there were many levels of acceptance of a plan that included this item and not the second item, so.
So I would hope we have some kind of an emergency fund.
We do, but again, I think she was trying not to use extra funding
I understand
and
that.
fluff,
Yeah.
spend
Again.
more, while everyone was being cut this year, so. Their meeting is next, look at the calendar, their meeting is next Tuesday, the 13th, so I would anticipate that
Board of
by,
Ed?
Board of Ed. So, that amongst their other important budgetary items, they discuss this. And then potentially we'd hear back from her before our meeting on the 20th. So, all right, with that, the next item is more tax refunds. So I move that we approve a refund to CoreLogic for Hurley in the amount of $4,215.01. This is the same as some of the ones we had last month where they made the
Yeah, I'll second that one.
owner, taxpayer paid, and then their CoreLogic paid afterwards. They wanted the refund for their taxes, for that deduction. All right, seconded by John. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
I will move to a refund in the amount to Wells Fargo in the amount of $3,020.29. Straczynski and Fisher. Second.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
I'm sorry, I have a
Yes.
question. Does this one
Yes.
have an address? Am I not seeing it? Does that matter?
Cemetery Road.
Oh, this is land. right, just like, no.
Ms. Straczynski?
No, Straczynski is,
They overpaid on their mortgage to get the
Okay.
tax credit,
maybe do you see the,
but they're on
Okay.
cemetery. Maybe she, her.
Oh, there it is.
Her to read it.
this is their
Oh,
property.
okay,
And then it's
Gotcha.
going back to the address.
got it.
All right, did we vote?
We didn't vote yet.
All those
I
in favor?
interrupted.
Aye.
Aye. All right. I move to approve. This is just a certificate of correction for Joyce Wilkins in the amount of $253.90.
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. So moved. All right. The next item is talking about videotaping our meetings. So Liza had given us a first shot at a policy regarding official recording of open meetings. Such a Monday. I had just a couple of quick pages and they were all, or they were, grammatical. Official recordings must be, it's just extra must be. Must be.
Oh.
Must be.
Must be,
Yeah,
must
I
be.
really wanted to make sure you got the
He
point.
did, and the first selectman and/or his or her designee must ensure that the recording is posted for public viewing in accordance with all official, I thought policies. Should it be plural?
Yep.
Probably, yeah.
And then under B, policy, again, these are my quick changes, it is the town of Willington's policy, instead of just town, because we didn't define town. Or we have a definition of town. So again, this is just a first shot at a policy, and then move from there into what would be like. Did you have an opportunity to read this before now, John?
I did, and, the only, well, some of the questions I had were, would, any witness has the right to refuse to testify during any recording. This is a public meeting, and, anyone who wishes to speak in a public meeting is speaking in public.
I think that was for not the official recording, but a recording by some, another party.
Right.
And I'm really disorganized on this.
Yeah. There's two separate components here. There's the official videotaping, that's that which we can do as the board, and then there, or what any
Re-sanction.
board
Mhm.
chair can have happen within any of the public meetings. And then there's the, a set of rules that are different for people who would like to come in that are not a representative of the town or are not, rather on the board. So there's the official videotaping, and then there's a policy that specifies many more obligations for somebody who's coming in as a third party, or a resident, or whatever, videotaping, and sharing that information, that they're two distinct processes, if that makes sense.
Okay, that according to freedom of information laws, anyone can walk in and videotape any meeting that's open to the public, as long as they're not disruptive. So we have to keep that in mind. Asked Fred Schoen to look in this, he's come up with quite a bit of information here, and he has a couple of suggestions on it. Cameras are pretty cheap. Well, I'll let you read this and
Yeah.
we'll get back to it next week.
Okay.
And,
I definitely haven't had time to read this.
yeah, we are making progress, I think,
I'm
here.
moving forward.
excuse me, John, Fred's last name Schoen?
O-E-N.
All right, so we'll take a look at John's correspondence from Fred with some suggestions, information, and our policy. Maybe know any other changes you have, and we will bring this back at our next meeting. It'll stay on there until we move one way or the other.
Because there is one question, if we want this done townwide, or if we want each board to have their own policy on it.
I would like it to be townwide,
I would too.
so that there's some continuity with what we're doing. But, so we have to start here with us, so I figured we'd start with our boards and move forward from there. So, all right, so crumbling foundations update. Two things, I have a tour on the 14th, a Valentine's Day tour, with Pam, Commissioner Tui, I think is how you say her last name, she's from the Department of Housing. And the plan is to tour 2 homes in WIllington, crumbling foundations. Robin, correct me if I'm wrong, she's doing this in multiple
Yes.
towns,
Yes,
correct?
and she has 2 tours, 2 towns that day.
So, be going out there with her to take a look so they can have some firsthand knowledge of properties. And I know things are moving forward with the soon-to-be licensed Captiva Insurance Company. So they're making some progress in trying to get some of that funding that's been talked about actually committed and being distributed. So, budget update. Immediately following this meeting, for any of you who'd like to stay, we will be once again looking over our budget for the upcoming budget season, fiscal year. Right now, at last look, things look pretty good. I believe we'll have an increase overall, although I still think it might look like a decrease overall, although it might look like an increase because the town clerk's budget has been merged in with ours now that it's an appointed instead of an elected position. So now instead of being its own budget, it will be incorporated with the Board of Selectmen budget. So it's going to make our budget look like it's gone up, but when we present to the Board of Finance, I'll specifically separate the two, take a look at them, and at last glance, they were both under. And so Donna will have some new numbers for us tonight. So hopefully we'll stay on that path. And with that, I'll move on to good and welfare. 2 things I wanted to express condolences to a longtime resident whose family still lives here in town. That was Cliff Stout. His parents were both teachers in Willington Public Schools, and his sister's currently working at Center School. So he lost his battle with cancer a couple weeks ago, so that was a loss. And Maureen Parcells' father passed away on the same time, so express our condolences to both of them. We're doing continued work with the MS4 stormwater management, and hopefully at our next meeting you'll start seeing a draft of an ordinance that we need to pass as part of the compliance with that nice unpleasant mandate, because we are an urbanized area.
Yes, so.
We're very urbanized here.
Clearly.
So we must do all these things. We still do not have a permanent full-time assessor. However, Helen Tots, who is the assessor in Suffield, and she does part-time work in Bolton, is working on getting our grand list finalized for us so we can move forward with that. She's working with Rachel, and that seems to be working out very well. So we're very thankful to her coming in and helping us with that. That's all I have. I see our tree warden has joined us. Is there anything you wanted to share? Or were you just
Well,
here
actually,
to
yes.
visit? Okay.
Mr. Marco?
Yes, thank you, Andy Marco, I'm the tree warden. I do get a letter from Eversource, from Erin Baer, she's the arborist for Eversource, and she gave me a map that's really hard to decipher as to what roads are going to be trimmed,
Okay.
but it doesn't have any other roads on it. It's very hard to determine what these roads are. So I'm going to call her and see if I can get a list of the roads,
Okay.
and so it's a little more I don't know if you need to know about that, or if it's just a matter of interest. I think it might be worth having in your office in case someone calls you.
If they call us, and then we share that with Public Works.
That's all I was thinking. I don't think a lot of discussion. We don't have much control over it. It's going to
They're
happen.
just letting us know. what
But,
they're
right,
doing.
it's-
Do you know when they plan to?
March of 2018 is when it's going to begin.
And does it give each road or?
Well, I mean, if I can approach the bench here.
A map with red lines,
Permission
you're supposed to
granted.
guess.
If you look at it, the roads aren't labeled.
Oh,
And they don't
excellent.
really match the roads that are on the town map. Like, that would seem to be Eldridge Road, but these roads coming off of it don't exist. That would appear to be Myrtle. I don't know what that little squiggly is.
Is that Y Road?
No, I don't, well, it should, it's going the wrong way. So I don't really know.
Is that
If
the
that's
senior
Myrtle,
center?
then that could be,
No, because there's Willington Hill.
right,
So
if that's
like-
Myrtle, then that could be Y.
It could be Y, but it's
And that
kind of
would
a-
be the old South Willington Road, the
I
dirt
guess so,
section.
yeah, right. That might be Old South Willington Road and.
But what goes across here? It says Penny Hill?
I guess, well, that's Pitty Hill and Eldridge, and that might be Red Oak
Red Oak
Hill,
Hill.
and maybe that's the little bit of the road that goes towards Wellington Oaks, but
A
it
map
doesn't really
with
match
names
the
on it would
map.
be so
Yeah,
helpful.
wouldn't it? And
I
other
mean,
Context,
roads too.
who knew? No,
That-
you get two roads and you get to play.
Yeah,
I'm
so
sure there's an app for that, Andy.
I'm sure.
I'm gonna just call her. She's a
Okay.
nice lady. I
Yeah,
talked to her when I
sure.
talked to her about the school stuff, so.
And they probably have several versions of the
Just
same
this.
map with different levels of.
Planned work is scheduled to begin March 2018, so.
Yeah, the only thing I was thinking is, when Public Works on our minutes, they say what roads, we're gonna be working on. And that wouldn't be a bad thing to.
No,
if
not
we
at all,
had that,
share that.
Right, that's,
add it
yeah.
in there, so.
Yeah, I just got this tonight, so I will
You get
find
to
out
play
from her a list
yes
of the
or no.
roads, and I'll share that with everybody, and then they have that information and so on.
Speaking of trees at Hall School, how's that going?
Well, that's kind of been remitted to the Board of
It's-
Education.
They're coming
That's kind
down.
of
I know
their
they have a
thing.
plan and
I
a
posted the
timeframe.
signs, I got no calls. Susan
Okay.
got one asking what the sign said, but nobody seemed to care, and everybody that was interested seemed to be informed. The next step is that they did, I think I mentioned before, that Aaron did say that Eversource might be willing to provide replacement trees if indeed replanting is something that's desired.
Yeah.
Eric and I kind of talked about maybe cool things we could do with the trees, but it isn't really worth it. The people who cut them down will haul them away, and that seems to make the most sense. It sounded clever and interesting to try to do something more creative, but it's way too much trouble.
So I know Dr. Jacoby, they didn't work out in the timeframe they had originally hoped
Right.
for them to come down, but I believe it's going to be soon.
Yeah, that's fine, so.
Last time I talked to her, they're moving forward with it.
What happens after that, I don't know, but if I need to be involved, somebody contacts me if they don't, it's fine.
Right, anything else?
Just condolences, I'd also like, to the family of Evelyn Wilson, who was a long time resident of the town, passed away recently. Did you know?
Oh, thank you.
No. Wilson White, Roger.
Is it Roger's sister-in-law?
Yeah.
I mean, I know Roger and Marlene, but I didn't know her. All right. With that, I will move to adjourn at 7:29.
Second?
All right. So that ends our regular meeting.